Today's agenda, we will be talking about the use of a SAMP in the Port of Virginia, key objectives for the SAMP, how it was developed and the process used, highlights from the SAMP itself, and why this particular SAMP is unique. And we have quite a few attendees as normal, so we won't be able to take audio questions, but please use the question box. I will relay the questions to the presenters, probably interject one or two of my own, and I will guarantee you that we will follow up with all of the questions in email. So if we don't get to your question live, we will certainly get to it in a follow-up email. And again, if you can be specific with your questions, that's helpful, and we will answer them online. Last thing I just added, if you like what you're hearing today about the case study of the port presented by Blair from KPMG, and want to share your own case studies in this series of webinar, please contact me or contact Bodwin. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to share more case studies from IAM members in the US and Canada. No, probably should have put this first. Your host, I'm Tom Smith, retired from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, from the College of Engineering there. Bodwin is executive with Copperleaf, one of the founders of Copperleaf organization, but he is also the chair of the IAM Canada chapter. I'm one of the directors of the IAM USA. Bodwin is chair of the IAM Canada. Presenters today, Blair is manager at KPMG in their infrastructure advisory, and also an IAM member and certificate holder, a graduate in public policy from Duke University. And Dan is the vice president of asset management at the Port of Virginia. And as I learned in a conversation last week, is just starting a PhD program in analytics. And I want to put that in because near and dear to my heart, anyone with the courage and interest to start a PhD program. So congratulations on that, Dan. And with that, what I'm going to do is turn this over to Blair.
Thank you, Tom.
And let him share his screen. And there we are. Thank you, Blair.
Tom, just test, you can see my screen without the webinar overlay. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you for the introduction, Tom. I'm Blair Trame with KPMG. I'm a manager in KPMG's infrastructure advisory practice based out of New York. And I'm joined by Dan Hendrickson. To start, I'll just walk you through our agenda, which Tom has already touched on, before I hand it over to Dan to give an introduction, some context to the Port of Virginia. Like I said, Dan will start just introducing you to the port, maybe an overview of some of the assets and some of the objectives and strategy for the Port of Virginia. We'll talk about key objectives for the port SAMP, some success stories from introducing or implementing the asset management program at the Port of Virginia. All organizations are unique, but I think we have some great lessons learned from the port. We'll go through the process to develop the port asset management program and SAMP. You may hear the cliche throughout that the journey was just as important as the destination, but it really is true. We'll touch on some highlights from the port SAMP. We won't go through it entirely, but some key sections we'll look at, and then we'll finish up with just really kind of highlighting what we believe makes the Port of Virginia SAMP unique. And then we'll save time for questions at the end, but we've also asked Tom to interrupt us and pose questions throughout the discussion. We want to make this much more of a dialogue rather than a lecture. So definitely encourage questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to introduce himself and introduce the Port of Virginia.
All right, hello. So I'm Dan Hendrickson, Vice President of Asset Management and Special Projects at the Port of Virginia. I've been at the port for about 5.5 years now. For the first 4.5 years, I was in the analytics department here. So I did business case development, operation analytics, sales analytics, all sorts of different areas, built up a data warehouse and a BI system for us. And then about a year ago, we decided we kicked off the asset management, and I volunteered to move to take the leadership of that, as it was a major area where I saw the port had a lot of room to make some very big improvements. So the Port of Virginia is the third largest port on the East Coast of the Americas. We are the only current deep water port that can handle the largest ships, container ships right now on the water. We have 4 main deep water facilities, a river facility, and inland rail hubs. So the picture you see right now, I'm going to kind of go clockwise around it. Up at the top is NIT, Norfolk International Terminals, which the state has run since shortly after World War II. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that, but it has been an active port used by the Army going back to the early 1900s. At the bottom is the Portsmouth Marine Terminal. This is a facility that had been partially leased and run by different shipping companies, partially run by the state, up until 2010, where kind of due to redundancy, it was mothballed. In 2015, it was reopened because we needed the space. And at this point, it's been kind of semi-re-mothballed again for containers, but still being used as a non-container terminal. We also have a lease for some of the land and some of the berth there for a company that'll be setting up a logistics hub for offshore windmill blade production. Or they'll be building offshore windmills and they'll be using that as their logistics hub, where they collect the blades, collect the towers before going out to put them on the water. And then on the left at 9 o'clock on the screen is Virginia International Gateway. This port was originally built by Maersk Shipping Lines under their APMT brand. And when it was built, it was the first automated terminal in the Americas back in 2008, 2009. In 2010, the Virginia Port Authority took over operations and leased the facility. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on VIG in the next slide. All right, so when the port took over VIG in 2010, it was half built. So the company initially built it halfway with room to expand as the amount of containers expanded. Starting in 2016, we came to an agreement with the new owners of the port that we had been leasing from to build out a new expansion of the port. So if you look at the picture, the right half of the screen used to be, up until 2017, was grass. The left hand was a semi-automated terminal, which is now about 10 years old. So we started this production $320 million to go from 15 stacks with 30 semi-automated cranes, adding 13 new stacks with an additional 26 cranes. And we also took over, all the way to the right is our rail yard. This used to be a human-driven crane rail yard that instead we put in semi-automated rail-mounted cranes that allow a much more rapid rail loading and unloading operation. Altogether, this was, and we also added the 4 new major ship-to-shore cranes that are kind of in the middle at the bottom of the picture, that are the aquamarine color versus the light blue. Altogether, this project was budgeted at $320 million, supposed to finish in September of 19. It came in a couple million under budget and was finished a few months early. So it's an amazing transformation that was done, almost doubling the capacity of the facility and refreshing a lot of the equipment with new. If you look just slightly to the left of the middle, there's 2 empty stacks. This is because as we expanded out, we decided to do life cycle overhauls of the original 30 cranes, which is kind of one of the early asset management type decisions done as this, not just expansion, but looking at the life of those cranes and making sure we manage them. So this is Virginia International Gateway. Again, it was the first automated or semi-automated facility in the Americas, and its model has now been copied around the world. Next is Norfolk International Terminals. This picture I purposely chose is about a year old. As I said, this facility was originally used by the Army as a Army logistics hub back in the early 1900s. You can barely see it, but right at 3 o'clock on the screen is one of the remnants of 12 warehouses that all had cornerstones from 1901 to 1909. 2 of those 12 are still there. We have the 2 piers sticking out into the water were built during World War II. They're currently unable to have people inside. They're no longer safe for use. And then I'm going to continue going right to left across this. The rail yard at the right side was originally designed in the late 80s for what at the time was some of the best view of an efficient rail terminal. We added some new equipment in the 90s to slightly modernize it, but it's still 20-year-old design. The first section to the just to the left of the rail yard is what's called a straddle carrier container yard. When this was built, containerization came here, containers came off of ships and were put on chassis. The chassis are the trailer behind the truck that the container is able to rest on. And the chassis were just parked in a grid. At one time, when we had all chassis there, we were able to hold about, I'm sorry, I'm going through my notes quickly. 4,000 containers total on the terminal at a time. But we went to a straddle carrier operation in 2004. A straddle carrier is a type of crane that has turnable wheels that has 2 legs that are wider than a container. So it can drive over top of a container, reach down, lift up the container, and stack them 3 high. And these narrow lines, 1 container wide, 3 containers high, are what you see in the small section just to the right of center. This allowed us to go from 4,000 to about 16,000 containers on terminal at a time. What we are now doing is building out the facility to look more like Virginia International Gateway with semi-automated cranes. You can see the big section just to the left of center where we have a number of 12 stacks already full of containers, and this was a year ago. We have all 3 modes there at once in this picture. That will allow us to go from 16,000 to close to 40,000 containers on the terminal at a time. This denser allows a lot more container throughput for the year. It also makes it much quicker to deliver containers to trucks. All the way to the left are 6 more semi-automated stacks that when this picture was taken were under testing. And then we have empty section in the middle where when this picture was taken, they were being just getting ready to be constructed. As of today, we have all but the final 3 stacks of the 30 built. We have all 60 cranes delivered and just the last 6 right now being final assembly before being turned on. At the time in 2017, when we purchased the 26 new cranes for VIG and the 60 new cranes for here, that 86 crane order was the largest single yard crane order in the history of this industry. All right.
Thanks, Dan. I believe, the story that Dan's told in this photo really kind of tells the asset management story or shows the challenges that the port faces. You have quite a diversity of assets from multi-million-dollar ship-to-shore cranes down to pickup trucks and everything in between, whether it's the straddle or shuttle carriers, the rail yard, and these piers here. So, I mean, these piers are really impeding the port from being able to, dock ships in these areas. They're a relic from a time when ships were loaded and unloaded from the side, and for the port really to realize the greatest capacity for NIT, they're going to need to remove them. Additionally, rail connections are a huge asset for the port. They operate in a competitive environment, and in order to entice shippers to make calls rather than to their other East Coast ports, or to drop cargo in Virginia rather than taking it to the West Coast and having it be transported across the country. One of the feathers in its cap is its rail connections, and you can't see sort of off screen, but this rail yard rail lines really go into traffic sort of just off screen, and the ability or the port has a limited daily window when trains and rail can make connections. And I mean, this photo really kind of lays bare the complexity and the breadth of challenges that the port faces. So, jumping into some key objectives for developing the strategic asset management plan at the port. Really, it starts with, the SAMP was a way to drive and frame asset management discussions at the port. Starting with how to define value. Value at the Port of Virginia is efficiently moving cargo in and out of the port. Efficiency meaning both cost and time, which time and logistics equals cost. And how to better manage the port's asset portfolio to realize value. I mean, that's the crux of asset management at the Port of Virginia. How to, have the optimal mix of assets, how to optimally maintain them so that you can move cargo in the most efficient way possible. So, the SAMP really laid a framework, and we tried to follow, the IAM guidelines, and make sure that we were capturing all the relevant info and following industry best practices. And that really helped to frame, the discussion at the port. This is meant to be an executive level document. We'll show some of the key sections, and we'll go through an overview. But really, each section of this document can be and has been taken to the C-level, C-suite level, to the board of directors, to get their input and get their sign off. And really, this is an opportunity to achieve buy-in. So we'll go through the kind of roles and responsibilities, the different parties that are involved in asset management. But to date, it's really been focused on getting buy-in and achieving, the top level line of sight. So this is, again, an executive level document. We involved leadership in getting their input and guidance and sign off when developing the document. And, it's really a medium to communicate the asset management strategy to the upper level leadership. So I'm going to turn it back to Dan to walk us through the first step 0 and 1 here, and kind of the key enablers to the port's asset management program.
All right. I think the 0, wait for the time is right, is something that was even hard for us to understand. This was kind of our third time trying to get momentum in starting asset management. When we had the major construction projects going, that was the main focus of the organization. But especially after doing $860 million worth of construction, getting the idea to everyone and getting the buy-in that, listen, we have all this new equipment, all this new investment entrusted to our care. We need to make sure we have a system in place to reliably take care of it and steward it for the long term. Additionally, the port kind of went through a whole cultural modernization. 5 years ago, shortly before I joined the organization, a analytics team was set up. That analytics team took some time. It got a lot of momentum where most decisions were looking for the analytics before the decisions were made. Capital investments started having business cases written by the analytics department, not by just the owner, so that it was an independent, consolidated, consistent view. We had built up that view and trust that the culture of making analytics-based decisions was there. So we had to wait till the time was right, having the equipment, having the culture, having the people. And then in some of our second attempts to get it going, one of the problems was the lack of primary responsibility. It was a lot of people were kind of said, as a second or third thing, please help out with this. But no one was, this is your full-time day-to-day job, especially no one of a senior enough level. So I was in discussions about this and trying to get it going again, and I volunteered myself at that time to say, we need this VP level department. I'm a skip level to the CEO. You know, I know VP at different organizations means different things. So my boss's boss is the CEO. I have his ear if I need it for what is going on, to make sure that someone is paying attention full time to the commitment to get it done, to full time make sure VP level peers are coming to meetings, getting their action items in, and has enough, at that time after doing the analytics, enough rapport with enough of the leaders able to pull it off. I don't think we would have been successful with an external candidate coming in. Someone needed the relationships already with a lot of the management team. Once I had the department, had enough momentum to get the funding, luckily then I was able to bring Blair and his company in to start helping us.
Yep, so KPMG started the asset management journey with Port of Virginia by doing a maturity assessment and developing a roadmap and where the port wanted to go with its asset management program. And, you know, building off of that, we started instituting a strategy in the fall of 2019. And one of the initial steps we took was to convene an asset management working group. We'll get into the composition later. But this group meets monthly, first Thursday of each month, and it's been integral to getting buy-in to the asset management program. It's a great cross-section of all the different areas that asset management touch. And it was really a key enabler in being able to kind of overcome the challenge with COVID-19. We, you know, as consultants, we're not able to visit the port after, you know, early March, and the port was sort of operating in a somewhat remote and somewhat in the office environment, and our meetings went from in person to virtual. But to have that rapport already built, to have the expectation that those meetings are important and are attended, you know, on a monthly basis, we're able to keep our momentum and keep, you know, keep going forward. So, you know, the working group roles and responsibilities were set, and, you know, Dan can walk you through, you know, this chart here. But, you know, setting sort of roles and responsibilities, what the working group was empowered to do and decisions they were empowered to make, what Dan was empowered to do and the decisions that he could make, and how, you know, leadership was informed and, you know, kept aware and you know, brought into decision making was all codified. And then from there, we started with developing the asset management policy, which at the port, we're calling the asset management principles. And then, you know, initial discussions were starting with you know, the SAMP outline, which is based off of IAM guidelines, you know, framing the port strategic discussions around completing that document and, you know, keeping in mind industry best practices. That template was really integral to you know, keeping the working group on task and making sure all the bases were covered in developing the asset management program. Dan, do you want to maybe speak to you know, what the asset management working group took on? But first, you know, here, you know, this graphic at the bottom are all the different members, not including Dan, that comprise the asset management working group. So you can see it's a great cross section of all the key key groups throughout the port.
Yep. So we, as you said, it's cross-divisional. We made sure kind of have 3 different groups of asset owners. We wanted our accounting department, who has a very big say in, between what capital is available, how things are capital versus expense. I talked about the importance of our analytics group, which is in our innovation division. We have representatives from our operations team and our internal communications who handle both. Well, we have the internal communications director who's part of our marketing communications group. So we made sure we have a cross-divisional team representing all the major users and owners of the different port assets. Also, it's a good group where we have people who come from different industries, people with different backgrounds. We have our head of operations used to be with a ship line and had a different view of how the port's assets appear to our customers. Our head of maintenance used to be one of the leads in operations, so he has a good understanding of both what it takes to use the equipment and what is necessary to keep them up and running. So we want to make sure that with this group, we have a diverse group of people representing the whole company, but also are able to step out of what their own individual divisions do to bring their whole wealth of experience to help think strategically. As Blair said, we have one meeting a month. When we were able to meet in person, we were making it a 4-hour full afternoon, all getting together. And it's kind of one of the asset management problems of the port. We were able to meet in an office building we had that can seat about 150 people and currently has 10 people working in it. But because of that, we had very open conference rooms with no disturbances while we were in there. But we probably do need to take a look at right-sizing our office space at some point. But that's stepping away from our day-to-day, getting this group together to think through these strategic problems. Maintenance wasn't trying to get one more thing fixed, or operations wasn't getting asked why certain trucks were stuck too long. Our accountant wasn't trying to run down an invoice. We were able to focus on asset management and think strategically. And that stepping away was some of the very important things. And this led to much more of the journey. It's the journey, not the destination. Getting that group together to think long-term, not just short-term. One got all of the vice president, mostly vice president level in the working group, bought in on our ideas and our decisions, but let them all better understand the purpose so that when they go back to their bosses at the C-suite, they're able to explain and have a lot of opinion on why we're doing what we're doing and why it was important. All right, and then
this is Tom. Let me just interject here. I love seeing this chief information officer in the list there.
So
how did that come about, and how did that go?
So our chief information officer is not actually a C-suite chief. It's a little tricky. We're required to have, as a state agency, a position of a chief information officer, but his more formal title is the vice president of IT.
Oh, okay.
So he is also down a level, and so he's at my same level in the org chart. He reports. So he reports to the chief operating officer, as does the vice president of maintenance and the vice president of operations.
While I have you, there was another question about, this was for Blair. What was the tool that you used for the maturity assessment? It was the IAM maturity scale, is that correct?
It's a tool that KPMG has developed. Our asset management baseline review tool, which is based off of the Institute of Asset Management's, publications, and really covers the entire breadth of asset management. So we do workshops, meet with a cross section of the organization, and do an assessment of where the port is currently, where they want to be in the near, medium, and long term.
And you had met with what, almost 15 or 20% of all the employees through that assessment?
Yeah, I believe it was about 15 or 20% across 6 different workshops, half-day workshops. So it was, an opportunity for, kind of, I guess, manager and above level to give input and really, get an idea of where the port is, what's already kind of in the works improvement-wise and where they want to go. Like I said, on a 1, 2, and 5 year time scale. Should we press on, Tom, or any more questions at this time?
Yes. No, that's it. That's good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so one of the first things we did is develop our 6 asset management principles. The port, like most companies, has a mission statement and a vision. Kind of that is some of the foundation of the company. Out of that, we have 6 core values: innovation, sustainability, helpfulness, mindfulness, accessibility, and fortitude. And the port has made a pretty big push as part of our culture to bring those up, thank people for demonstrating them in their work. Overall, to meet our mission statement, we have 4 primary objectives: fiscal responsibility, excellence in operations, sustainable growth, and living our values. So going through these strategic objectives and in line with our values, we created the working group with Blair, created the overall asset management principles. These kind of set up our asset management policy. For us, policies are kind of a legalistic document. This is what you must do if you want to not get fired. So we didn't want to call this a policy because of the other connotations within the company. So the 6 principles of asset management as our scope document is what we came up with. And you can see them on the screen and can understand how they match those values and our objectives. We're looking at life cycle cost perspective. It's part of our fiscal responsibility. We are people focused. It's part of our mindfulness and our accessibility. We're looking at our global reach for our sustainable growth. And, as a port, this is kind of a new innovation way of looking at things.
Yep, and to tie this back to the SAMP, looking at the graphic at the top, it's really kind of starting with the organizational objectives and strategy, translating that to an asset management principles or asset management policy, and then sitting below that is your asset management strategy or SAMP, and then below that is your more tactical documents such as your asset management plans, information strategies, etc. So I'm going to jump into a little bit of the highlights from the actual SAMP. So you can see here on the screen, here's the outline. Not going to go through it entirely, but this should be very much in line with kind of IAM guidelines. Really, wanted to sort of toe the line between keeping the document sort of high level, executive level, but having the breadth in necessary detail. One of the things that we did with the working group, each working group meeting, as Dan said, was a bit lengthy, especially in the beginning. We've sort of streamlined our meetings a bit more lately. Tried to make it interactive, so we did a SWOT analysis, and some of the key findings from that that made its way into the SAMP. We captured sort of key risks that came out of the port's risk assessment, risk register. And we also covered off communications and change management. As Dan has alluded, this has been a sort of transformational project throughout the port, and we didn't want to be naive or arrogant enough to think that we could, just simply dictate this to people. So, we've used the SAMP as a way to get the top level buy-in, and part of the communications and change management. We'll start going to the sort of lower levels of the organization. We have designs to do focus groups, engage maintenance staff and operations staff, etc. But frankly, those kind of got put on hold with COVID-19. So we haven't totally tackled that challenge given the current operating environment. As far as opportunities, really around planned investments and adoption of new technologies. So the opportunities around, taking whole of life cost considerations and driving efficiencies both in cost and in time, getting back to what's valuable to the port. And then, as Dan talked about, the port was an innovator in the semi-automated terminal space. Now, some ports are getting into full automation. It's still a bit of nascent technology, but the port's aware of it and is thinking about when it's, when it can and when it should start to develop a more connected, IoT-driven terminal. And then, recognize weaknesses around its investment decision making. So it's taken the opportunity to think about its approach, think about where there's improvement on putting scrutiny and rigor around the capital governance and capital planning at the port. And then, a threat to the port, which it is to all organizations now, is knowledge management and the idea that, a lot of potential staff attrition and institutional knowledge could retire or walk out the door. So this, this SAMP was one way to approach that, to make it a repository of all these, best practices and ideas throughout the port. So here's a bit of an illustration. Yep, go ahead, Tom.
There was a question about, there was a question about engaging upper management, and clearly the SAMP process cemented that engagement. But as you said, when the time was right, you had a window of interest, and then you used sounds like you used the maturity and the SAMP assessment to open that window and build the executive level commitment. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I'll take that to start, and maybe Dan can add color. I mean, I think that Dan and his boss have done a great job at, keeping the CEO and the other C-suite level folks and the board informed of progress. Starting with the maturity assessment and the roadmap that came out of it, and also, putting the asset management principles in front of them for their feedback and approval. And then sort of biting off different sections of the SAMP to bring to their attention, and ultimately they're going to see the full SAMP here soon. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and just having the members of the working group excited about what they're doing, able to see that, we're making important decisions, that this is something that will be a benefit, that it is clearly a gap that we have had in the past that we don't want to continue having. So having direct reports to the C-suite excited about it, constantly having some actions and reading and, wanting to come to the meetings to have the discussions, they are then able to keep their bosses engaged as well.
Thanks, Dan. Anything else, Tom, any other questions right now?
I think you covered a little bit about the backgrounds of the people in the working group, and it was a variety from engineering to analytics to business and finance. I think is that pretty much the case. There was a very good mix of functions within the organization.
Yep, that was the goal of the group put together. I think of our 7 major divisions, 5 are represented. I believe the only 2 that are not are HR and sales.
Okay, so gonna keep moving through the SAMP highlights. So here's a illustration of kind of the photos that Dan showed us at the beginning of the presentation. This is really what we see as the value chain throughout the port. Everything between a ship on the left and the 2 primary modes of transporting cargo, trucks and rail on the right. Everything in between that is part of the value chain. And value again at the port, keep hammering this home, is getting that container from left to right or right to left in the most efficient way possible. So we took that value chain and we applied a couple different lenses to it. We looked at opportunities and risk, which we'll get into here. And we also, looked at, reliability and performance, which, we cut just for the sake of time. So, jumping into some opportunities and risks, and this, will be familiar after we went through the SWOT results. IT represents both a risk and an opportunity for any organization. These days, IT is integral, and an attack on the port's IT system could have very negative effects. So that came through in the risk register, and mitigation of that risk is paramount at the port. So it's something they're aware of, and constantly trying to stay ahead in the cat and mouse game of cybersecurity. IT also represents a huge opportunity for the port. So the connected, automated terminal of the future is going to require significant IT investments, whether it's movement to 5G, all the back-end infrastructure that's going to support connected assets, and also the the telematics and IT equipment that's on your straddle carrier or your ship-to-shore crane or even your pickup truck. The port is interested in investing in those technologies and introducing them, but wants to have a cogent strategy before they sort of rush out and do something that maybe doesn't fit into the greater long-term plan. And then just some opportunities that were identified through our over the last 6 months through our working group meetings and working with Dan. Opportunities to better manage the ship-to-shore cranes and shuttle carriers, straddle carriers. These are high dollar assets, meaning that they're multi-million-dollar, in the case of cranes, initial price tag, also with a very significant annual maintenance burden. So high dollar equals high opportunity for cost savings. So Port is looking into ways to better manage those assets, and then moving to somewhat low dollar. And when it comes to the Port's portfolio, it's light vehicles. So we focus, and we'll show an example for pickup trucks on the Port's pickup truck fleet. It's forklift fleet and it's hustler fleet. Hustlers being these sort of small, almost like small tractor trailer type pickups or equivalents that can move the containers on a chassis or around the terminal. So the Port we identified has a bloated inventory of these vehicles, and it has reliability and performance issues, and to ensure that the number of vehicles are in service on a daily basis, it has many spares. So the Port has identified the opportunity to refresh and standardize its fleet, and its analysis shows that they're going to get a positive return investment from keeping younger fleet with a lower maintenance burden, standardizing from greater than 12 different makes and models of pickup truck to one. So these are sort of great opportunities that the Port's identified. Going into what I just described, we're calling this right sizing fleets. So today we focused on light vehicle fleets, and my background, I started in asset management, working with public transit agencies. So setting fleets is something that I've done, and we applied that approach working with Dan at the Port. So it was meeting with operations, meeting with maintenance to really get a handle on what are your in-service needs, and really being operations as the primary user of vehicles, and maintenance being the maintainer. It's almost a service level agreement between operations and maintenance. I need 40 pickup trucks on a daily basis is what operations tells maintenance, and maintenance, it's their job to make sure that 40 are available. So we've really kind of dug deep and had some difficult conversations, and gotten a handle on what is needed on a daily basis, and this is going to equate to right sizing fleets. So what's needed, thinking about what spares are required, so considering both planned and unplanned downtime, and consider also weighing portfolio effects and kind of netting out to what the size of your fleets will be. So here's an example for pickup trucks. So you can see kind of this graph shows above the axis is the annual budget, and then below the x-axis is the annual need, and the line is the delta between the two. So the need is essentially the backlog, what's past its useful life. So you can see, I believe this is $13 or so million of pickup trucks in year one. By just looking at the size of the fleet, we're able to retire 50 vehicles, retire and not replace, from FY20 to FY21. So that puts a significant dent in the backlog. Those, believe we found that the port had a spare ratio of 71%. So just retiring those 50 vehicles reduced it to roughly 50%, which is still higher than what's optimal. But the plan over FY21, 22, 23, 24 is to chip away at the vehicle's backlog, and then you can see from FY25 on, there's a plan just to replace every 5 years. So the port has done analysis and found, that keeping vehicles for 5 years is optimal for them. So I'm gonna hand it back to Dan to cover off some of the key risks that were, that we've identified in the SAMP. And again, these are not just the high or key risks to the port. It's really the key risks to being able to deliver the SAMP and implement the asset management program.
And I think probably the first one is universal for all companies: inadequate funding. That is both for executing the capital strategies as well as maintaining a department and advisors to be able to go through it. Just right now with coronavirus and the worldwide recession from it, it's making it very hard for everyone to figure out their budget and what is going to be happening. And we're definitely feeling that in some of our planning purposes, especially on things that are looked at strategic and long term. But we still have in our budget our first order of new pickup trucks, and the first time we've done anything other than just buy onesie twosies. So that's a big win for the department. But the risk of funding, especially as we try to get into more and more of the asset classes within the port, is pretty clear to us. The asset information strategies, we have realized we are very inconsistent and don't have all the information we need to make as wise of decisions as we would like. So the port, together with KPMG, developed asset information strategies to start filling those gaps. To do so, though, we need people to step away from their day jobs and do extra projects for what they see as nice to have and good things for the future, but don't really impact them day to day. So keeping people engaged to actually make the changes is a risk. We have a lot of business processes in our capital side, our maintenance side, that need to be updated, that we have identified. Human capital, this kind of goes along with all the others. It's not just asset management professionals, but also people in the IT department having time to break away to add new interfaces between some of our systems to pass asset information cleanly. Having enough people who know the systems, who know what we need to do and have the time to do it and aren't stuck on other projects. Institutional buy-in, I think this is, right now we have very good buy-in. We have the C-suite engaged, but our CEO announced his retirement last month in March of next year. Keeping all the C-suite engaged through a leadership transition and making sure the new leadership on board, it's going to be a risk to the asset management department. And then the suboptimal life cycle strategy is where we were for a long time in the port. Our maintenance team is excellent and our IT team exceptional. Our maintenance team is able to fix anything that breaks and very quickly. Unfortunately, that if you want it done good, fast, or cheap, choose two if you're lucky. We chose good and fast. And our maintenance team was excellent. Our ship-to-shore cranes, if they go down while working on a ship, it costs the ship line about $1,700 an hour for that ship. The crew of 27 men unloading that ship costs about $3,000 an hour. Altogether, if a ship-to-shore crane breaks, that's $5,000 an hour sitting idle. So our maintenance team is excellent at getting stuff fixed. And that mindset of getting a ship-to-shore crane fixed went throughout our maintenance department. They were hitting pickup trucks with that same gusto, so that we were fixing pickup trucks that were 25 years old with $6,000 engine overhauls, where the truck was maybe worth a few $100s. So getting that suboptimal life cycle strategy ended and getting people thinking is a big risk. Our IT team managed to keep 1985 HP Unix mainframes alive until last fall. We were teaching people and sending people to COBOL courses so that some people out of college can be learned to program servers that are older than they were. Again, they're an exceptional team, kept it going, kept these heartbeat systems for the port working, because we didn't have good life cycle strategies. We didn't have good maintenance planning. So we're getting away from that. That 1985 HP Unix machine was retired last September, but we want to make sure we don't fall back into some of those old patterns. And it is always a risk that we will do so if we're not vigilant. With the SAMP, we did a number of other documents and plans where we kind of had some of the most bang for the buck going forward. We talked about the principles. Blair mentioned some of the communications plans. We started with specific asset class maintenance plans, or asset management plans for the light vehicles, pickup trucks, forklifts is one class, and then our IT department has another. The capital expenditure manual, this was actually just a compilation of ideas from people, some processes that were documented, some that were not, so that it was clear how capital decisions are currently being made. We hope in the next phase to get into making a better system and process for making capital decisions, but at least at first we needed to get down on paper what we have today, how it's being done today, before we can look to start improving it. Then we also put together the overall framework. What is the scope of our team and our projects? When do we overlap with finance and decision makings? At what point do we want to say, one item when we were discussing pickup trucks, instead of using a pickup truck for this, we could, buy huts. But we wanted to say asset management is going to help the operations team figure out how they're going to operate their terminal and cost the capital side. But we are not going to make decisions on how people operate. That's outside of our scope. But what is in our scope, given the operational decisions or helping with operational decisions, we can build the cost models of different decision points. So that is our asset management framework.
Thanks, Dan. And the SAMP again is meant to be high level, and it's sort of introductory to all these different topics. So we do get into sort of at the portfolio level how assets are managed. We do touch on roles and responsibility and governance in capital governance. But to have the adequate depth and detail, these other documents are part of the collection of asset management documents to sort of codify all the objectives and policies and procedures. So to wrap things up before we get into questions, what makes this SAMP different? We really try to focus on succinctness, so making this very clear and concise and digestible for busy executives. We try to make it accessible and relevant to a wide audience. So we do have the head of maintenance on the asset management working group, but if you were to hand it over to one of his lieutenants, it would be relevant to that person. So it's not watered down. It has sort of adequate level of detail, but it also avoids nomenclature, acronyms, et cetera, and things that, maybe would make a document, not accessible to a board member who, isn't focused on ship-to-shore trains or, port operations or, port assets on a daily basis. We, the formatting, what we showed in the highlights is exactly, what is in the SAMP. We put an emphasis on graphics and data visualizations. So where possible, we substituted in graphics or visualizations in lieu of text. We really tried to make it a detailed presentation. So rather than a report, it's a little bit more detail than you would see in your usual executive presentation. And again, all these other accompanying asset management documents include the necessary detail, relevant details, et cetera. So, with that, our contact information is here. Dan and I can stick around and take some more questions. And Tom can tell you about, how to submit questions if we don't cover them today, but, feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions, and, really appreciate the opportunity from the IAM and for you all giving your time to hear about, what we see as a success story at the Port of Virginia.
Great, thank you very much. I have a couple questions. We are getting near the end of the hour. As I said, we will answer all the questions in email. Last time we had quite a number of questions and we did a short report, so might do that again, and that way everyone gets to see all the answers, which is, we compiled the questions in categories, wrote answers to them, and then appended a PDF of the slides to that. This has been recorded also for your use later if you want that. And as say, Dan and Blair have been very, very helpful in putting this information together. And Blair, you said they could contact you directly if they needed something that we don't get to in the report. So
That's right.
I really appreciate that. We had 135, 40 attendees, a very sizable audience, and a lot of attention to what I think is a key piece of the asset management puzzle, which is the SAMP, and doing it right in a way that it's useful and usable, and not just something to be bound up and put on a shelf, but something to live and refer to. And I think what you said at the very beginning was that the SAMP was focused on value, and you mentioned value several times, and you mentioned the value chain and working against the value chain. Is that fair to say that really what was driving the SAMP, the presentation, the focus of the presentation of the SAMP?
Absolutely. We tried to make that sort of the North Star for all this work, is, how to most efficiently move cargo in and out of the port. So everything we do, whether it's whole of life costing, setting fleet sizes appropriately, monitoring, where the port's going as far as demand, all that is really to plan to meet current needs and future needs.
Were there any burning issues? Were there any single, really headline issues that helped to drive this, or was it really just the need to continue to increase the value of the assets to the port operations?
Dan, you want to take that one?
I think some of it is driving the value, and a lot of it was, as I said, $860 million worth of new assets been entrusted to the port that we needed to make sure we were being good stewards of into the future. We knew that in the past, I think we got behind on our maintenance, behind on our life cycle plans. The recession in 2008, we paused capital purchases and we cut back dramatically on maintenance, and we never fully recovered from that. We want to ensure that something like that never happens again. And getting a system in place, thought processes, and a culture in place, where even now during the next recession brought on by Corona, we are still investing in the new life cycle that the asset management group has determined needs to be spent.
And maybe I'll add to that. When we started, being engaged with the port, they had put a lot of time and effort, investment into making their operations more efficient. So throughput is very important to them. It's something that they monitor, and it's something that makes them competitive to other ports. And they really, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're beginning to see diminishing returns in those investments. So, as far as the time it takes to get a container in and out of the port. So as part of that value conversation, time is one part of the equation, but also, cost is another. So more efficiently managing the assets that are part of that value chain is, the next opportunity to make for, a more efficient value chain. So I think it was a natural progression.
Yeah, and for me, career-wise, moving here to asset management from analytics, I think that and the analytics team have made so much progress going through the operations, understanding all of it, helping them clean up the operations to get as much value possible out of every man hour. One of our major metrics is how long it takes a truck to come into the terminal, drop off one cargo, pick up the next, and get back out. There has been so much analytics and understanding and optimization of how we're working that this was a big area that could be improved. Doing that same level of detail analysis to optimize how we're getting the equipment and machinery there to do that work.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that insight. It's a few minutes after, and I think we should close this down. As I said to all those who submitted questions, if we didn't get through them verbally, we will answer them in a short report on the webinar. Encourage you to ask questions of Blair if we don't get to what we need back to you. And thank you all for attending. An excellent presentation, and happy to have both of you on. Look forward to talking with you in the future and hearing more about this effort. My guess is that you'll have another report ready in a year or more, and some further progress to talk about. But thanks again, and thank you all for attending. And with that, I will close down the session for today.